Is the Russian military burying a personnel crisis? And are the only people talking about it the mill bloggers? I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. Let's talk about Russia's hidden manpower crisis. Okay, so this is an interesting article, again, from the Kiev Independent, which is pro-Ukrainian, but it is very, very fact-based. And I'm going to show you guys why I think they're actually onto something here. So the report is that Russian losses are mounting in Ukraine, and the only people who seem to be blowing the whistle are actually Russian mill bloggers, right? Now, Russia officially is not experiencing any kind of manpower shortage, right? The people at the Kremlin maintain that the Russian military isn't just maintaining its manpower levels, it's actually growing. And in the past 4 months, though, the UK's Defense Intelligence Office has said that the last 4 months have been the costliest for Russian forces since the war began. In fact, Russian casualties were averaging well over 1,000 a day. In fact, they were 1,200 a day in May, over 1,200 a day in May, nearly 1,200 a day in June, nearly 1,200 a day in July, and nearly 1,200 a day in August. Now, casualties, again, is wounded and killed. But I point this out because here's an important metric. Let's say we use 1,200 as the average here, and we assume a 30-day month, meaning that Russian losses in the last 4 months have averaged about 3,600 a month, or 36,000 troops a month. This is a huge problem for Russia because they're only able to generate about 25 to maybe 30,000 new troops every month. And those troops have to be sent through a basic training cycle. But it means that Russia is, even as they are raising their signing bonuses for troops, they are still likely short-handed. So while they have to pay more to get those 25 to 30K, they're losing about 20% of the troops that they have a net loss of 20%. So, or their losses exceed their new recruits by about 20%. It's the best way articulating statistics, hard. Now, what does this mean? Well, it means that one, the mill bloggers are starting to rage. In fact, they are accusing the Kremlin of ignoring the widespread practice of using specialist troops as cannon fodder in infantry attacks. Now, they also say that the handicapped and wounded are sent on one-way missions. Some cases, they won't even make it to the assault. This is according to one Russian mill blogger. And I could tell you that while I can't share it here, I have seen the footage online of Russian troops who clearly are severely wounded. Many of them are wearing crutches, and the footage is actually from Ukrainian combat drones who observe these Russian troops, clearly very wounded, being sent to the front line. We've heard reports of this. If you are interested in seeing this and other uncensored combat footage, you can get it on combatvetnews.com. The members-only videos, right, are for anybody. This is my version of Patreon. This is the best way to support the channel and make sure that I can continue to do this every single day and keep me free of there is no amount of money that I would accept to work for or speak for a government or major media corporation, but you know, I got mortgage payments like everybody else. My team has rent and groceries and healthcare. We all do. So you guys' ability to help us out is the thing that sustains us. So check it out, combatvetnews.com. Link is in the description. There's all kinds of benefits for all the membership tiers, and it's a great community to be a part of. So, but I've seen some of the footage of those wounded soldiers in the assault. So I can tell you factually that occurs, right? And the specialist, though, is something that we're increasingly seeing, right? And what do I mean by specialist, and why is specialist so significant? Well, the answer is that the Russian military figured out that the best way for them to sustain combat operations is to bifurcate their military. There is effectively two Russian militaries. On one side are the infantry troops. Infantry troops receive limited training. They're sent into the battlefield to force the Ukrainians out of positions. These are the so-called one-way meat assaults. Ukrainian troops report that these Russians have very limited training. They oftentimes appear to have very rudimentary at best light infantry tactics. But they have quantity. There's just so many of them. They keep coming forever and ever. On the other side, a smaller minority, right, of the Russian military are specialists. These are people that can do militarily valuable jobs who the Russian military says, listen, it's expensive to train them. It takes a long time. We can't afford to lose them in great numbers. So again, when it comes to high loss operations, infantry assaults are 90% of it. And then here you have people like drone pilots. You have experienced tank crews, artillery crews, right? Anything that requires real specialty knowledge. These guys, the Russian military has to preserve them. But there's been a problem lately. More and more, we're seeing reports of these specialists are being put in these infantry roles. Here's the problem. When Russia loses one of these light infantrymen, and I'm being generous calling them light infantrymen, they are civilians. They're basically the Russians go into their villages. They recruit drunks. They recruit drug users. They recruit criminals. They recruit the dregs of Russian society. They give them a few weeks of training, and then they send them on these one-way assaults with basically no plan to get them back, right? The nice thing is when you've got 2 weeks of training, right, their replacement is currently in a village, but within 2 weeks, their replacement's going to be conducting another assault. An artillery crew, you got 3 men making up a good, skilled artillery crew or a good drone pilot. That is someone who takes 6 months to replace. And even then, they won't be as good as the experienced people, right? You have such high casualties in the meat assault units, there's no experience. No one has any experience. If you survive one mission miraculously, you're definitely going to die on the second one, right? So you've got these guys who it takes a long time to replace. They're valuable. They're tough. So when the Russian military starts to send more and more of them into the fight, it means that they don't have the ability there's no backfill. The backfill isn't going to happen. So it is essentially literally like killing the golden goose, right? Yeah, you might get 2 golden eggs at once if you kill your golden goose, but now the goose is dead. And so that's what it seems like Russia's doing. And though that's a pretty serious allegation, right? Is it true? Well, here's some of the evidence that I think leads me to believe that it is. The first is that the Russian FSB has been fighting in Kursk. The Russian FSB, guys, is Russia's intelligence arm. This is the equivalent of us giving highly trained CIA case officers and FBI special agents, giving them M4s and sending them on one-way assaults at Russian trenches. Okay, it's not what they're trained to do. It is a massive waste of money. Because again, an FBI agent takes what? A year, 2 years to recruit? Imagine turning them into an infantry grunt. Same with a CIA case officer, right? Now, there's reports that FSB Special Operations Forces, right? This is like the FBI HRT or like CIA's like Direct Action Group. Some of them are fighting trying to target and identify Ukrainian sabotage reconnaissance groups in Kursk. But the FSB officer himself says that's not really we're not trained to conduct these combined arms battles with heavy equipment against regular armed forces. And that's what they're doing now. They're supposed to be counter-terror folks, small terror groups. Again, they don't have the training and equipment to respond to big Ukrainian units conducting combined arms attacks with drones, heavy armor, light infantry, all of these Ukrainian type tactics. And the FSB Special Operations Center says, again, like our FBI, they don't have any formal contact, any formal command relationships with the military. The FBI is Department of Justice. The military is Department of Defense, right? So, again, this is a sign that the Kremlin may be getting a little desperate for more people, but that's not all. we've also seen a story about one of the most experienced drone commanders. This is someone who's been commanding drones, piloting drones for the Russian military for at least 2 years, possibly longer. And he reported that he literally released a video that was only to be released in the event of his death, where he said, listen, I'm being sent as an infantryman on an assault unit. Me and all the other drone pilots in my unit, the unit's been disbanded. We're all going to be sent on these one-way assaults. Again, another piece of evidence in your cap that says that the Russian military may not have the personnel that it claims to. And finally, another piece of evidence that this is true is that there's reports that Russia's Admiral Kurtsatov aircraft carrier just gutted its crew and sent the sailors to fight on the front line. Now, the aircraft carrier had been heavily delayed. It had been in dry dock repairs for years, but sailors are not infantry troops. These, again, being a sailor in the Russian Navy is not a safe job, right? But they're literally pulling these sailors and they're not assigning them to other ships. They're not assigning them to shore duty. They assign them to the front lines of Ukraine. And what this says is that the Russian military, and the argument is that when Putin says, hey, I want the Russian military to expand, that he knows that it's already only at like 60% fill. So when it says expand the Russian military, what he means is allocate more money towards recruiting. So it may be actually a sign that the Russian military is a lot more hollow than it's been letting on, and that they can't actually sustain this massive pace of casualties that they've been taking. And it's especially bad because when you look at the map, you realize that in exchange for the highest casualties of the war, the Russians have managed to seize in the last 4 months about the same amount of territory that the Ukrainians seized in like 2 weeks in Kursk Oblast. So again, this is some stuff to really think about when you're looking and when we consider the state of the Russian military and try to assess whether or not the Ukrainian forces are really having this as tough a time as they think. Because remember, inflicting massive casualties on the Russian military is the strategy. It's trading terrain in order to grind on Russians. Anyway, guys, that's all I had. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Thanks to Martin Baum, Chris Rossi, Stuart Abel, Daniel Brown, Sergei Zinchenko, Chris Holmes, Chris Gorsuch, Daniel M., and Ida Skycall, our Colonel tier members, as well as all of our Lieutenant tier members. I couldn't do it without you guys. I appreciate you so much. See you in the next one.